And so what this technology enables us to do is for the first time enable wearable devices to have brain-computer interfaces inside them and work in real-life situations. Whether it's a pair of headphones for tracking focus and attention, like the ones we have with Master Dynamic, to you can imagine a future where we have earbuds that track neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's as you wear them throughout your lifetime. Helmets that can track things like traumatic brain injuries. And that's not even hypothetical. That is the work we're doing right now with the US government.
Good morning, guys, and welcome back to our fifth installment of the Hartman Frontier Forum, where every 2 weeks we dive into a new topic in frontier technologies that is going to redefine the future. And today we're going to have a really exciting subject where we discuss brain-computer interfaces. A few segments ago, I talked about the intersection of augmented reality and AI, and how essentially we're going into a future where humans will become enhanced, where humans essentially become superhuman, utilizing technologies to essentially bring us to the next level where we can be better in work, we can be more efficient, we can be better in life, even in old age, can become more capable, live longer and better, and also enhance our relationships and even how we interact with technologies on the most basic level. Now, we've done some of these things on more near-term aspects, like, for example, augmented reality, where you can wear smart glasses today. But what we're diving into today is something that essentially you'll be hearing a little bit about in the next few years, but you'll be hearing a lot about 5 years, 10 years from now, because the ultimate computing interface, so to say, is the thing you already have on you, which is your brain, right? Being able to control devices with your thoughts, being able to maybe even shift your mood with a digital device, where the connection goes both ways. You can send signals, you can also receive signals in between devices and yourself, and this merge really happens pretty quickly. Now, what is exciting is that we have found one of the leaders in this space over the last few years, which is Ramses. He's one of our founders in Metaverse Ventures 1. And he's one of the leaders that has been innovating in this space since, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, 2014. So it's now over a decade that Ramses has been building in this space. And he built, and I won't steal too much of his thunder, but he built one of the first brain-computer interfaces that, the first EEG devices that you can wear non-invasively over your head earphones that can track your thoughts. Well, that sounds it's invasive, but it can track your brain waves and make intelligent analysis and analytics based on your brain waves. And what's cool is that it's not just an idea that he's been building on, but rather it's a live product. So you can actually go to stores now, you can buy these headphones. These are the Master Dynamics headphones. So I wear them, for example, like an Oura Ring, where I track them. So I put them on and it tracks my focus sessions. It tells me about my focus levels, my various kind of brain waves. And he will dive an hour into all the stuff. But what's cool is, again, Ramses, not only is this a live product that is available today, but he also has DoD contracts where the government works with him on creating this for helmets for our soldiers, for example, and many other paid pilots with other big enterprises. So you'll be seeing this from some of the biggest headphone makers that you probably know in the coming years. So before we jump into the quick on the slide, as always, disclaimers, nothing is investment advice. It's probably pretty hard actually to invest in BCIs right now, unless you're investing in something like Ramses. So there's a little risk for you going crazy on the stock market here. But as always, just for educational, informational purposes. Now, without further ado, I want to hand off to he's a doctor, Dr. Ramses Alcaide, the founder and CEO of Neurable, one of our stellar founders who has recently started raising his Series B. In fact, I think the raise is more or less complete. Now it's at the point of oversubscribing, and he has been crushing it, which he'll tell you more about, but essentially bringing brain-computer interfaces, not just theoretically, not just invasively like a Neuralink, but rather bring it to the everyman, where even you can have access to this kind of technology to enhance your day-to-day life. So without further ado, over to you, Ramses.
Awesome. So I think that one of the most key and pivotal parts of this entire journey is that for the first time ever, we have the ability to understand the body at scale. And it's not something that we created. It's actually something that wearables have been doing for quite some time. And I think that's really powerful, specifically because it changes the way that we understand the body and healthcare, right? So for example, right now, if you have an Apple Watch, you can essentially track your heart rate. But then eventually with machine learning, heart rate turned into heart arrhythmia detection. And then long-term, this turned into essentially, letting you know that you should go to the doctor and get checked out. But really what's happening is that we're seeing not only can we do it with individuals, but we can do it at scale. So millions and billions of people at a time. And instead of going to the doctor once or twice a year, you're literally getting checks every single day. So longitudinal data collection. Now, the thing that's really key about this is that there's something that's been significantly missing this entire time, and that's the brain. The brain is the most important organ in our body that's affected by the most conditions, but we're not tracking it. And we actually have technology to track that. That technology is called the brain-computer interface. They've been around for quite some time, as early as the 80s. And the main concept of a brain-computer interface is that there's some sort of device that lets us tap into the information of the brain and then interface it with some sort of computer, whether it's used for controlling devices or even understanding, passive brain-computer interfaces as well. Now, there's a lot of kinds of brain-computer interfaces, and probably what you're most familiar with is Neuralink. This is invasive brain-computer interfaces. These require surgery, and they're really, really favorable from the perspective of being able to provide high-quality data. But the problem is that for most healthy individuals, that's just not a solution for them. Like, let's take, for example, the most successful invasive technology, which is actually the hip replacement, right? 99% of people would not get a hip replacement unless they absolutely needed it. And so really, invasive technology is going to be used for the most significant use cases. So individuals like, for example, who have ALS or have communication issues that prevent them from using traditional forms of communicating. And so when we think of invasive, we think of this as kind of companies like a prosthetics company. So when we think of Neuralink, at least from our perspective, this is like a company like Prosthetics United. They're going to have a very targeted solution that is going to help people in the most significant need. And then you have this entire aspect of non-invasive brain-computer interfaces, and there's so many kinds. There's some that use magnets, so MEG, some that use lights, like FNIRS. But the one that's most popular is called EEG, or electroencephalography. And what this actually does is it picks up electrical activity from around your brain. And these are incredible devices. They can pick up so many, significant responses of the brain. Actually, just looking at EEG by itself, this is the entire spread of things that can be detected with EEG. It's absolutely enormous. It's literally the most powerful wearable that you can have for the most important organ in your body. Right? We can track things like TBIs, Alzheimer's, PTSD, dementia. You can see the brain aging with this technology and also identify neurodiverse conditions. And so having this technology is incredibly powerful. And not only can it be used for disease detection, but there's an entire spectrum of applications with brain-computer interfaces. Everything from something as simple as controlling a device or conscious control to what's called a passive brain-computer interfaces, which can be used to enhance existing technologies and even enable effective computing. And I'm going to be getting into each one of those, and I have some cool demos to show everybody about these systems as well. And so I've talked about how revolutionary this technology is and how it's going to change the world, but why hasn't it? We've had this tech since the 80s, but it's really not been able to scale. And the reason for that is this. You either have these large head cap systems that essentially look like torture devices that go on top of a person's head. And this is just not scalable. Like, you're not going to have billions of people walking around the earth with these large head cap systems. It's just not going to happen. Or you have these consumer grade systems that unfortunately just don't provide the signal to noise, or they're not able to detect brain signals strong enough to really create enough value for the customer. And that's really what's prevented this technology from scaling. And so this is where Neurable comes in. It's been my work since essentially 2011 at the University of Michigan, and we spun out in 2014. But essentially what it is, it's a software application that uses AI to increase the signal while reducing the noise of brain data. So a lot of people think that we make headphones or other things like that. We don't. Actually, these headphones are from a company called Master and Dynamic. We license our technology to companies like Master and Dynamic. What we do is we build AIs that increase the signal to noise of brain data. And normally when brain-computer interfaces companies get funded, they build some sort of tech out and they push it out to market. And then unfortunately, it doesn't deliver on customer promises. And that's really prevented the scale from happening And our path has been not to just release product. We're not the first ones to do headphones or earbuds, but we're the first ones to do it at such a level of performance that we've had significant acceptance for the technology. And you know, the product is like selling like crazy right now. We're really proud of the work we've done. But it took a long time to get there. We essentially started in 2011 with these gel caps and have essentially gone to smaller form factors, all the while retaining signal to noise. That's been the big work. So essentially what we've done is we use AI so that we can replicate a lot of the same signals, about 90% correlation coefficient to these large cap systems, but we're able to bring it down to a device like a pair of headphones. And I think that the best way of showing this to you is to actually just see it live. So I'm going to give you a quick demo. Here I have some headphones from Master Dynamic that you can see on the inside. They have these silver fabrics. These are actually the EEG sensors. Typically, you would see sensors on the top here or like spiky electrodes around the ear. We're able to use these fabric sensors because our AI is able to boost the signal to give us reliable data. So to put them on and use it, you just put them on like a normal pair of headphones. That's it. Normally, to set up a brain computer interface, it could take sometimes up to an hour of like putting gel and all this other stuff to make it work, moving it around, fidgeting. With our technology, you just put it on and it works, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually share my screen. And I'm going to hit start down here. And what's going to happen is you're going to see a graph pop out to the left-hand side of my screen. And that graph is actually my focus and attention in real time. Normally, this is a signal you would pick up from the forehead, from the frontal lobe. And that's why you see a lot of brain-computer interfaces that essentially have forehead bands and straps. But we're picking it up essentially from the ears, even though the signal comes from my frontal lobe. So what I'm going to do is the following. I'm just going to let it stabilize. There we go. I'm going to start focusing, and I'm just focusing on these numbers here to the right. And essentially, the more I focus on them, the more that this line goes up. You can see how reactive it is. And then when I get distracted, you're going to see very soon, it's going to start to go down. Now, this is actually showing off 4 key pieces of IP of our technology. The first one is that I'm able to capture the signals across the entire head. So this signal comes from my frontal lobe. We're picking up around from the ears. The second one is that signal is very weak, so we're able to boost it up. The next thing is I'm going to start focusing again, and you'll see that this line goes up in just a second. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep talking while this line goes up, and you can see that it's still going up, and then I'm going to get distracted, and it goes down. So we're able to remove artifacts in real time. And so even when I was talking, it still worked. And most significantly is that I just put on this system and it worked out of the box. So all calibration has been removed. And these are the things that have been preventing brain-computer interfaces from scaling. Essentially, we've solved the 4 key issues that have prevented this technology from really growing out. One is that now we can use everyday form factors because we can collect signals from different parts of the brain, even though the sensors are just around the ear. The second one is that we can boost it so that it actually works like a product and not a science project. The third one is it's robust to artifacts. So you can use these outside of the laboratory. You can walk around with them. And that's why the military loves our technology so much. They can literally put it on soldiers and have them walk around and do their normal work and still record reliable brain activity. And then the final thing is there's no calibration. Imagine if every single time you had to wear this headset, you had to fidget with it, and then you had to collect 5 minutes of data just to calibrate it. That'd be a nightmare. And so what this technology enables us to do is for the first time enable wearable devices to have brain-computer interfaces inside them and work in real-life situations, whether it's a pair of headphones for tracking focus and attention, like the ones we have with Master Dynamic, so you can imagine a future where we have earbuds that track neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's as you wear them throughout your lifetime. Helmets that can track things like traumatic brain injuries. And that's not even hypothetical. That is the work we're doing right now with the US government. Or even AR glasses that you can control using your brain activity, because you're not going to want to carry extra controllers with you. You're just going to want to put on your AR glasses and you want them to work seamlessly. And brain-computer interfaces have the ability to do that. So what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to step through some of the applications that we can do with brain-computer interfaces and how what we're building is going to slowly incorporate these devices, these areas, and how you're actually going to see an impact in the next few years, not decades, the next few years in any Neurable powered product. So the first one is that there's a significant amount of health implications with this technology. Take, for example, this graph. So you guys saw a graph similar to this. I was plotting it. It was my focus in real time. In this case, we have 0 to 100% focus here to the left, and then we have time in the bottom. And so this is actually a person reading a book for an hour and a half. And this is a pretty typical response. We see them in this high focus zone, which is in green. They start to get tired, which gets dropped down. And the key thing is that when you feel tired, that's your body that's tired. Your brain has no pain receptors. So your brain has been tired for hours beforehand, and we're able to detect when your brain is tired even before you feel it. And by telling you to take this short break, you're able to boost your performance and get back to focus. And that's one of the key value propositions. Imagine having a 25-hour day, right? That's essentially what this technology enables you to do. But as we were building out this system, we noticed, hey, there's this group, this 20% group that we can't tell why it looks so different when they read a book. And so we went back and we asked them and gave them some demographic survey, and it turns out that they had ADHD, right? And you can see the huge variability in their focus as they're trying to read a book for an hour and a half, right? And as somebody with ADHD like myself, I feel very seen whenever I see this graph, right? But it is essentially showing you that you can start to pick up some really significant textures about how your brain works in order for you to better understand it and make decisions moving forward. And just to give you an anecdote to this, I was diagnosed when I was 15 years old. And before that, everybody just thought I was a troublemaker. I wouldn't be speaking to all of you today, right now, if it wasn't for the fact that I got that diagnosis, right? And so think about how many people we could create interventions for, understand them earlier in life, so that these aren't surprises anymore. To me, success would be, how do we create a world where no one is surprised with what's going on in their mind? On top of that, brain responses have a whole bunch of details just inside of them. These are actual brain waves. So these are not the abstracted focus levels. These are actual brain frequencies we can pick up. Some of them are associated to essentially sleep, like delta, these slow waves right here. Other ones are associated to fast processing of data, which are these beta waves up here, or calmness and relaxation, which is alpha, which you can see here between 8 to 13 hertz. Now, we can look at these pieces of data and actually understand the brain and help people essentially make better decisions. For example, let's say you're walking around listening to music, and we start to identify that there's some spikes that are occurring in your EEG, suggesting that potentially you might get some sort of epileptic attack in the future, right? You could be able to do an intervention early. And so that's one of the key things that we're working on right now. Now, once again, we're not diagnosing anything, we're not making any medical claims, but we're at least giving you the data so that you and a healthcare professional can make the best decisions you can. So that's where essentially our holistic cognitive vital system is coming out. It's actually a new feature on the app that's coming out later this month. But we're able to look at those brainwaves that I just showed you, so delta, beta, gamma, and then compare you to what's healthy. In this case, healthy for your age group would be in blue, and then your response would be in red. And we can see anomalies happening and see how these red dots shift. Now, we're already trialing this out with some of our partners. This is a key thing, for example, for soldier readiness. How do you know if a soldier is ready to be on the field after they've been deployed? How do you know that their mental health is at a good state, right? Soldiers have twice the likelihood of committing suicide because of the impacts that they get to their brain. But if we could better understand their brain health, we could make sure that both on duty and off duty, and even as veterans, they're being taken care of. Or think about one of the biggest issues that's happening right now in the military, which is blast overpressure events. A soldier shoots a rocket. This creates shock waves that impact their brain, and it creates damage. Now, right now, we have no good way of knowing how much time they need to recover, especially because in order to get that data, we need to capture it as these events are happening and see where the brain is at. Because you start to lose the best biomarker for identifying a blast overpressure event after 2 minutes of the incident or after they shoot the rocket. But imagine you get this exposure, and then we can see those red dots shift. And each day we can see, compared to your baseline, how you're going back to normal. And this is just part of the normal headset helmet that you're wearing when you're on duty. And we're bringing the same technology on the consumer side. So this is actually my brain data here. It gives you a brain age score. So in my case, I'm normally around 29 to 30 when it comes to my brain age. We're able to track different metrics and what's healthy. So you want to be within these boxes based off of your age group. And this was me actually before South by Southwest. And what's really interesting is I went to South by Southwest. Over the next 3 days, I essentially started going to these networking events, staying up late, drinking wine at some of them. And slowly my brain age started to creep up to 50, right? And I saw here in my data, my delta is above what's considered normal. Once again, delta has to do with sleep. So my body now needs more sleep. I need to recover. My beta, which is how well I'm processing information or my mental readiness, is below what's normal. And now I can tell that, hey, I really need to recover. So I started taking a few days to, still went to the events, but took a more neurally conscious approach. And then slowly my brain age went back down essentially to 29. But there's so many things that we can pick this up, not just daily trends, but weekly trends as well. But most impactfully is that some of these brainwaves, for example, gamma, or there's something called total power, are tied to different disease states. But the only way to identify these disease states is by tracking your baseline and seeing how it changes over time. And so unless you're tracking this baseline, once a week over years, you're not going to be able to see the difference. And I'll give you an example. Here's two elderly individuals, and you can see that this is the voltage on their brain. It's essentially blue, and over time, that voltage changes. This is somebody with Alzheimer's. You can see that the voltage of their total brain power is essentially changing from -4 to 2 microvolts. And the only way to know that this is occurring is if you have this baseline and you can track that change that's occurring. And so what that really also hints at is that there's a significant amount of opportunity here for either precision medicine or understanding different disease states. And precision medicine is so important because imagine that we have now your data just from a pair of headphones that you're using before you needed the medicine, during while you're taking it to tune the dosage, and then afterwards to see if what adaptations your brain has done and whether you need to up the dosage or you can slowly wean off of it. The next thing I'll cover is effective computing. Here, obviously, we're talking about, for example, a pair of headphones that you can use to track your focus. And these aren't hypothetical. They're literally now available, right? That's really exciting. And so what we can do from this perspective is actually look at the Neurable app. And we've designed this from the bottom up in order to help people leverage the features of effective computing to create healthy hygienes for their brain and their focus. We've gamified it so that essentially you score 100 points per day at least worth of focus. This is to motivate you to show up every single day and do a little bit of work, create a healthy habit. The second thing is that we can track different trends and gauge efficiency. Here, for example, I'm in blue. That means I'm in high focus. Yellow means I'm in low focus. And this is where I'm actually doubling my errors and creating more issues. And most significantly, I can't tell when I'm in this yellow zone because once again, my brain has no pain receptors. So when I feel tired, that's my body. My brain has been tired long before that. We can actually tell you to take a break on your phone and on the headphones and essentially boost your performance. And then the last thing is, as we gather more data over weeks and months that you use it, we hand you different insights. And we're going to be providing even more insights now that our holistic health system is going to be out soon. But here's an example of essentially my data and how it's changed me and made me a better, essentially, better at working and getting the most out of my hours during the day. Because it's not just about how much time you put in, it's about how effective you are with that time. So here you can see essentially me focusing. I'm doing a great job. I'm scoring 2 points per minute when I'm in this blue zone, and I'm scoring 1 point per minute when I'm in this yellow zone. And so the goal here is to never be in this yellow zone because as soon as you're doing that, you're doing junk work. What we can do is we can tell you to take a break, and then look what happens to your performance afterwards. You get this huge boost in productivity. So in this case, I worked about the same amount of time, 51 minutes versus 53 minutes, but I scored more points, even taking into account that I took time off for the break. And I see that in my productivity as well. I'm able to see that essentially I can get more done. But I think what's really cool is actually seeing a real world example. This is me and my data. You can see here, it took me a little bit to ramp up into work. Then I get into my work state. I get a break notification. And this is one of the coolest parts about the technology, which is you can then start to explore to see how do your breaks impact your performance. So in this case, during this break, I just decided to scroll social media for 10 minutes. And you can see that as I was scrolling through social media and I went back to work, I'm still burnt out, right? So I know that doesn't work anymore. And I got another break notification. And I was like, all right, I got to try something new. I got to try something different. So I went for a walk. I went for a 10-minute walk, and that was the second break that I had right here. And then look at my performance afterwards. Got a huge spike in productivity. And so I essentially was able to use the same amount of time, but be more productive. And for me, that just means, I'm being more efficient in my work. But for some people, that means better work-life balance. You don't have to take work home because you're able to get it done in the time that is set aside for work in an efficient way. And this same technology is being used by the Department of Defense right now to prevent accidents in critical shift workers. Imagine somebody looking at, flight controllers, for example, or drone pilots. They start to get tired. We're able to detect when that's occurring, have them either rotate a new person in or, get additional support. And so there's real world applications for this type of technology, not just for the office worker, but across multiple areas. And as part of effective computing, I showed you this graph previously that this is a person reading a book for an hour and a half. And then I showed you a person with ADHD. Well, now that we have this information and we have the ability to tune things, we can actually create solutions. So we actually created a biofeedback system in the device that's able to turn somebody who has ADHD and has trouble focusing and bring them up to medium to high focus consistently. And it's really straightforward. It's actually just inside the app. You press this button right here, and what you're going to see is that as the person essentially focuses, the music gets louder, and then when they get distracted, it gets lower. And that tiny nudge in music change is enough to remind you to get back to focus, right? So it's a kind reminder that you're starting to wander off. And it's able to keep people inside this high focus. So you'll see this screen here. It's going to be blue. And then as they get into focus, the music is going to go up. And then when they get distracted in yellow, you're going to see the music get lighter. And then when they got back to focus, because they noticed that their focus dropped, it went back to blue. The screen went back to blue, and then music went back up to its normal volume. But this is enormous, at least for somebody like me, because one of my biggest issues is when I'll read a book, I'll start reading, and then after about a sentence or two, I'll lose focus, and I won't realize it until I get to the bottom of the page. And it's so frustrating. It takes me forever to finish reading a page. But now what I can see is that there's a shift in audio that happens. And then after just missing a few words, I'm able to get back to reading and be able to finish each one of these pages. On top of that, the technology also lets you explore things. So this is actually me meditating by myself first. And you can see here my focus is high. I'm in deep meditation. I get distracted, deep meditation, get distracted. And I just used to think that I was a bad meditator. And I found it really frustrating because it's something that I really wanted to get into, but I never felt like I could. Then I went to a meditation session with Deepak Chopra, and look at this response. Deep meditation the entire time. And what this showed me, it's not so much that I'm bad at meditating, it's that I need a coach. And so this allowed me to try out different apps, Headspace, Calm. I eventually found one that worked for me called Waking Up. But I wouldn't have been able to, one, understand that I needed a coach, two, be able to find the right app for me, and three, then be able to track this and see my improvement over time. And I've seen tons of people reaching out with their experiments. Oh, I tried coffee here versus then, and I figured out I could cut my caffeine in half so I could sleep better, but now I can focus more. So all these stories are popping out. And these are all different ways that you can use the technology through effective computing. But there's also some future forward ways that I'll touch on real quick. For example, imagine right now removing distractions. What if we knew that you are prone to distractions right now, or you don't want to see these because you're focusing, you could, for example, see that in the future, your phone might be able to detect that from your headset devices and just turn on do not disturb mode until you're ready to focus again. Or imagine that you're working and we could detect things like errors. Actually, you can. This is called an error-related potential. So whenever somebody's working and doing their normal work, you get this black solid line. But if somebody does a mistake, or if something goes wrong in the factory, you can actually you see a different brain response that can then be sent to a manager to maybe turn off some of the equipment before somebody gets hurt. And there's so many other applications with effective computing. Imagine even just tuning the audio of a pair of headphones based off of the effective computing capabilities of knowing what your hearing loss is. So there's so many things that are already on the platform, and so many things that we're going to see brain-computer interfaces integrate with in the future as well. And now the last area that I'll really cover on is conscious control. One of the big issues that we have right now is voice, right? So when we talk about voice, the biggest reason why it hasn't scaled is because essentially two main issues occur. One is that all the sound around you creates issues, and then essentially from that, classification issues occur, and so you get a bad response. Or the second one is you're sending a message and it's not private, right? And so what if instead of the microphone picking up audio, instead picked up brain data or muscle data? Or what if instead of, saying it out loud, you said it in your head? So that's where we see brain technology going to in the future. This is actually one of our systems. It tracks muscle movement and brain data from around the ear. And so you'll see Dave right here holding his hands up. And essentially, he's going to control Spotify by mouthing the words play, pause, and next. And you can imagine that this is going to be the future technology for actually controlling devices in your AR systems. All right, Dave, can you make the music play? Can you go to the next track? Can you pause it? Right, that's going to be awesome. I can't wait for that to come out. But you can see how in the future, we're just going to have a completely different way of controlling our devices. And I lied. Actually, there's one more thing that I will be covering, which is enhancing existing technology. So we have so much incredible tech, and neurotechnology really has such a huge expanse in where it can go. But it can even be used to enhance the existing tech we use. For example, correcting audio. Imagine that you tell Alexa that you want to buy a toy Yoda and it misinterprets you. Now, this could become a very expensive mistake, but with brain technology, we can actually see the errors that you hear. So Alexa might say, okay, ordering a Toyota, and you will immediately say like, oh, that's incorrect. And imagine we can use that to essentially solve the prediction in real time. And I'll give you guys on the call here a little challenge. I'm going to read a sentence to you, and I want you to think about how it feels. Now, it's going to feel very weird, and that's because we're actually feeling a brain response that happens when we process language in an incorrect way. So yesterday, I tested Diane's broccoli of the issue. Now, that weird feeling that you see is actually called an N400. It's what happens when you hear a sentence that has semantic error. And there's another one that you can feel. The hearty meal was devouring the kids. In this case, you actually experience a syntactic error. And so we can actually pick up these brain responses and then use them to essentially fix the predictions in real time. Your Alexa can then say, oh, sorry, I think I did a mistake. I think you meant X. Or imagine having smart noise cancellation. You can actually pick up what a person is trying to focus their attention to audio-wise and reconstruct it, and then compare it to the audio in the surrounding and say, oh, they're actually trying to pick up speaker number 2. And then you can tune the noise cancellation system in real time. Imagine you're on the plane, you're watching a movie, the flight attendant comes to ask you if you want a drink. Imagine your headphones can just pause the movie automatically, keep the cabin low, reduce the audio of the person talking next to you, but increase the audio of the flight attendant in order for you to be able to converse with them. But what these examples really show is that the ceiling for brain-computer interfaces is immense. It's literally the next software. Just like software can be used across numerous applications, across numerous business models, that's what we're going to see with brain-computer interfaces. And we're going to see this slowly happening as they evolve from devices from listening, which is what we have right now, headphones, to devices for cognitive awareness using effective computing, to future compute devices with interactions, and then long term enabling us to understand the brain and health at a greater scale. And we're going to see a world where essentially every single device that we use becomes an integration of augmented reality plus brain computer interfaces. And this isn't hypothetical, it's literally happening.
Amazing, Ramses. Thanks so much for this presentation. That was super insightful. Even to me, still get to learn new things from you. So while you guys go write your questions, you can either use the chat or the QA box. I got some for you too to maybe kick us off. So when it comes to where we are now with BCIs, especially like with, let's say we're starting with this and we're going to this place where you might have both input and output, where you might get signals to your brain, or at least you can send signals like, for example, play Spotify, pause Spotify, and so forth, but on a commercial way. What's the gap? Whether that is like, what are the bottlenecks? Whether that is, do we lack the data or the data structuring? Do we lack the software, the hardware? Is it regulation? Essentially, where do you think the biggest holdups are? Or biggest
Yeah,
challenge to be solved?
yeah, I would say it has to do with the data, right? It's essentially we need to collect enough data to be able to accelerate some of these developments. So one of the
Mhm.
key things that we have on our control system is that everybody's brain is a little bit different.
Yep.
And in order to be able to generalize it and make it work like a product, there needs to be enough responses of people interacting with their devices in order to be able to scale out a solution.
Hmm. And so then from your, how many, I don't know how many customers you have, but are there still similarities between, so for example, like my brainwaves and your brainwaves, and can you actually map it to something that is scalable, so to say, where you see like, okay, if I think play and you think play, and 1,000 other people think play, that it maps to the same command?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And the answer is it does not necessarily directly map to the same command. But
Hmm.
there are general responses that you can pick up that do map. And that's something that we learned through this focus algorithm that I demoed in the beginning. At first, it worked on about 80% of people, but then we actually had to create 4 additional models to cover that last 20%. The only
Mm.
way we were able to do that, though, was we collected close to 8,000 people worth of data to be able to create these new models. And so that's what we're going to be doing with some of these interaction systems, where we have to collect, thousands more people worth of data doing these responses, and then over time, we're able to capture and generalize the technology enough that it'll work for anybody out of the box. It's actually one of our core pieces of IP that we can enable zero calibration as long as
Hmm.
we have enough data.
In terms of the hardware, I know you're going for in-ear headphones. Essentially, how much can you shrink it down, or at what point? Because you do need the surface, and for example, you mentioned for the play pause, you're also measuring muscular movements, right? What are some of the challenges in the hardware side to get
Yeah,
smaller?
yeah. To get smaller, essentially, we're already on track to be doing that. Honestly, the hardware is the least impactful part. There's
Okay.
already really small chips. Amplifiers can be really tiny. Obviously, with the earbud, the main issue is that everything's already really tight inside one of these earbuds. So you
Yep.
do have to make a little bit more space. But it's less so about the hardware. It's more so how do we use software to
Got it.
overcompensate the signal loss.
Okay. And you guys are the only operating system in the space, or how big is the BCI industry itself?
Yeah, I mean the BCI industry is pretty small, right?
Hmm.
Now, when we think about market sizing, you know, what we really think about is what is the audio industry, right? Because
Hmm.
we're licensing our technology to these audio players, and that one's really big. So, at least for us, that's kind of our main. And I don't know these numbers off the top of my head, to be honest. I'd have to pull them up, but
Yep.
essentially, that's how we see it. We're going into the audio industry using BCI as the next killer feature.
Makes a lot of sense. I want to bring one of the questions from the chat. Steve Walker asks, do you see a future where this tech will be used, where jobs will require people's neuro skills to be up to par, and you can offer this, for example, you can offer this to air traffic controllers?
I think I'd be less worried about that. We already have wearable devices that people could wear, and like workers aren't tracking those for employee like performance. On top of that, I have a friend of mine that works for a company, and they track their mice and keyboard to track performance, right? And they get
Mhm.
paid based off of that. So there's already technologies, to do that, right? So I would be less worried that BCI is gonna, change the way that we already do things from that perspective. The way that I would see it, and at least the way that we're approaching it with our customers, is it's more about how do we empower the individual. If
Mhm.
this person doesn't feel guilty about taking breaks because they'll actually be more productive and not be burnt out at the end of the day, it's better for the company, it's better for the employee, and the data doesn't have to be shared across both individuals. It can just be for the employee, and it gives them a certain level of autonomy and empowerment that they didn't have before.
100%. I mean, even from an employer's perspective, if an employee is really burned out, but they're maybe afraid to ask for a break or like for like a vacation or like a couple of days off, right? It's much more easily validated when the employer can see, wait, of my team who's performing lowly, who's having a hard time, right? Go take some time off, and you're becoming kind of like in a sports team, right? Like you're really managing your team from that perspective, making sure everybody's in the peak shape they could be in, especially because most white collar jobs, they're purely mental jobs. So if the mind's not there, then it's like being in bad physical shape when you're,
Exactly.
playing sports.
Yeah, you wouldn't put an injured athlete on the field, right? Like that's not a good move. That's going to hurt them long term. It's going to hurt the team's output. It's better to put a fresh athlete, even though they might be slightly less skilled or something like that,
Mhm.
and give them the recovery time they need to be their best selves.
In when I used to read a lot of like sci-fi books, I think in Blade Runner, for example, they had this device where like you could change your mood. You just swap the dial, and all of a sudden, like you feel euphoric, you feel happy, and so forth. And so, there are the idea of BCIs that are both ways, where like you can send signal, you can also receive signal. Now, with these, with non-invasive, I'm assuming, tell me if I'm wrong, it is likely only a one-way channel. I mean, you can send information out, but you can't send information in. Um, is that true, or like what is the path to being able to also reprogram the mind?
Yeah, I mean, non-invasively, you can do stimulation also.
Okay.
But obviously invasive is going to be a lot stronger. And honestly, there already is a ton of stimulation. If you think of it more from a biological perspective, like audio and visual is the most primitive form of stimulation that we have. We can listen to
Mhm.
music that affects our mood. We can actually flash 40 hertz light into a person's eyes, and it
Yep.
and it activates their gamma responses to flush out amyloids and plaques. So there's already ways of doing it. We're not focusing on that right now. I mean, these are still normal headphones, so you can listen to audio, but that's not our main focus. But the technology is there, right? And now we have a way to close that circuit to see how those interventions lead to real time outcomes.
I can already see that there will be, Reddit forums and whole YouTube cultures where, today it's like Huberman saying you should flash light in your face at 5, or like stare in the sun at 5 a.m. in the morning, like to really wake you up. But it's kind of an N of one, purely driven by like thought leadership. But once everybody has these, essentially you're able to just like experiment, and people be like, if you put a strobe light in front of your face at 5 a.m., like maybe that really wakes you up. I don't know. But they can really test and trial and see until maybe even supplements, what has the best effect, and not just for the general population, but for you in particular, right? Because everybody might react differently.
Yeah, and actually, if you go to my Instagram, you can see a lot of crazy experiments I've done, from walking on fire to having hot sauce and recording my brain activity. Cody Rawl just released a video where he took Alpha Brain, right, and measured
Yeah.
his brain activity with the headphones. So yeah, and that's what I mean by that empowerment tool. Like we've never been able
Mhm.
to see how does a neurotropic impact my brain. Well, now you can, and you can see it because some of these only work on like 70% of people. Well, are you that 30%? Is there a different blend? Like now you can run these experiments and get to know yourself.
Love that. A couple more questions came in. Armen asks, have you seen any applications for video games? Use brainwave input to pick a lock or summon a telekinetic powers in a virtual character.
Yeah, we've seen a few different applications, and we're working with a few groups in the gaming space. Can't really talk too much about those applications, but what I would say is that Neurotech is going to go into everything. right?
Hmm.
Gaming is a really good one. Where we really see the biggest traction in gaming is actually creating essentially like a Strava for the esports gamer, right? We have wearables right now for runners, for people who get on their Pelotons, but who's also an athlete? Esports players. It's just a different type of sport. And we don't have the tools for them to be able to track, monitor their performance, and essentially share their growth with coaches in a way that's effective, that takes into account their cognitive state.
I'm curious to this point on connect, and actually this maybe ties into another question somebody asked. Is this the start of us communicating without language altogether? My add-on question to that is, what is the speed of us thinking a command versus us saying it? I mean, saying it is already faster than typing, depends on who you are. But where would you say it ranks? And what's the accuracy of picking it up? Although I'm sure the last one will improve over time.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is that this is going to be similar to like a mouse versus a keyboard. It's
Mm,
going to help you click, launch like individual commands or individual actions. Getting to full text messaging, that's going to take probably some evolutions both in hardware and signal processing.
mm,
But the main goal is the future of you interacting with your technology is going to be eye tracking plus brain in
mm,
our display. And so your eyes are really good at scanning information, your brain is really good at clicking it. So combining these devices and these modalities along
mm.
with combining voice, you can imagine having this interface that you can interact with in a very quick way. It's just we have to leverage the biological components that we have in the way that they're stronger, right? In their strengths, essentially.
Got it. So like in the AVP, Apple Vision Pro or Ryan example, they are using eye tracking, but they usually make you then like pinch your fingers and you're just like always pinching. So instead of that, it will be even, I guess, more seamless where you're just looking and thinking and you will just fly through the menus that way without even needing the cameras that track your hands, which in a way could actually make the form factor smaller than larger, probably.
Yeah, and then on top of that, you can, launch, like for example, think about the apps you use. There's only about 3 to 4 commands per page that you actually click on. So
Yep.
you'll be able to rapidly click on the things you want just by thinking those words, for example. But getting a full text message out, that's probably going to still take a significant amount of time to get to.
Awesome. And then we see one last question. Let's see. Can BCIs be used with LLMs to make a personalized smart assistant?
Yeah, absolutely. We have actually a partner company that's doing that right now.
Where would the BCI come in on that front?
So the way that the BCI comes in on that front is more so from the perspective of you want to send specific messages to an individual.
Mm,
For example, let's say you get a text message, right? Well, you can do a respond in a very simple way, and then the LLM increases the accuracy of what that response is, and
mhm,
then fills in the gaps and sends the full
mm.
message to the individual.
That makes a lot of sense. I actually saw this was more of a funny reel yesterday that I saw where essentially it said like how humans will act with LLMs like by 2030. We're kind of like monkeys where we say like only a few very simple words like thank you. And then the Ella says, it has been such a pleasure to like do work with you, yada yada yada. Because like we will speak very simply. The LM spells it out for us in like proper English and so forth. And so I could imagine the same thing where you think the message in the most basic terms, and then it gets spelled out by the LM. To your point, so that's fascinating. Another thing that I was just thinking of is with AR classes, which we've been getting more into. For example, like there's an app that, an app on an operating system that we backed that essentially listens to your conversations and then contextually adds factoids or research based on what
Mhm.
you're hearing. So you might have described a certain jargon term. It will figure out, oh, that's something he might not know, and then it blends over definition, right? Or
Exactly.
you mention maybe a scientist's name, and it will give me a quick bio of like who the scientist is, right? Um, so now, right now it's guessing, right? Right now it's guessing what is something that he might want research for. But I guess with brainwaves, you could probably detect when there is, I don't know, confusion or when there is maybe intensified thinking because I'm trying to dig something up. And then it blends in based on that.
Exactly. And that's a great example of something that's going to enhance an existing technology, right? Imagine we can add a layer of brain information, even if it's just a little bit, but that little bit is enough to create a dramatic result in the output.
That's amazing. Any final words you want to share? What's the best way for people to stay up to date with you?
Yeah, I guess the final words that I'll share is that this is really the beginning of something much greater and bigger. This is the next software, right? And so keep your eyes out on it. Feel free to scan the QR code to reach out and learn more about both the product and the company. But it's been an absolute pleasure to be here. And I look forward to seeing, hopefully, some more people on the street wearing this headphone. It's a pretty beautiful experience.
Hell yeah. It's been exciting bagging you and watching your journey, from the pre-launch days when there was a lot more wires on this thing to seeing where it is now. So if you guys have any more questions for Ramses, feel free to shoot them our way, or you have his QR code now. So reach out to him, reach out to us. Happy to connect you with him or other of our founders. And also, if you want to learn more, if you're a family office or a venture capital firm, I think he is oversubscribing now. So there's a little bit more room left in the round. And otherwise, if you're just a regular individual that wants to invest in these kind of things, that's where we come in. We always, find the best of the best people like Ramses that are, innovating at the cutting edge. So with that, thank you so much for joining. And we will see you in 2 weeks for our next session. And Ramses, I'll see you soon. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.